Greetings, brothers and sisters within the Kingdom of England, Empire Bow Beyond. It is I, your humble noble brother, Deonde Belmont, from the illustrious noble house of Belmont. And today is May 15th, 2976 of the Berber calendar, which is equivalent to your 2026 Gregorian calendar. And like always, like I have to say here, which we all should be saying, it is a beautiful time to be alive. First, I have to give honors to our divine mother as well as our divine heavenly father. That is our divine earthly mother, that is, and our heavenly father. Have to give honors to our past saints and martyrs, kings and queens who have come and gone, to our righteous brothers and sisters today within the realm, to our king and queen today within the realm, to trustees, to the good people over the four corners of the world, as well as those of you who have now recognized your purpose and duty as the healers and messengers on the planet to uplift this planet back into the position which is considered the original position that she should be in, which is complete stasis, or in this case, balance. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and get started what we're going to be talking about today, which is part two of the Irish preserved in the Bible and the pyramids. Now, part one I had did on a different platform, excuse me, for the reason why, excuse me, give me 1 second, which is for the reason why we didn't have the same layout before. But once again, the information is still valid, and hopefully, you had paid attention to it based off of what the information was talking about, and not because of it didn't have the visual appeal that you would recognize before. But today in part two, we're going to go ahead and continue off on chapter three. Chapter three was titled "The Struggle Between Rome and Erie," or Erie, in which we know is called Ireland today. So for those of you who are just now getting a chance to take a look at the channel, or just now hear my voice, go watch the other videos that I have on this channel to catch yourself up to speed, because we are on a journey, what we call the intellectual movement. And anything that's moving, is going to have stragglers, and those who are going to miss their stop. So with this movement right now, for those of you who are on it, don't miss your stop, because we're moving, and I can't stop for others who are just who are late to their destination, or late to their arrival. So I want to go ahead and get started on this, and I don't want to waste too much time on the introduction. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Someone did make it known that my channel may be getting shadow banned. I believe it, because this information is not something that is privy to many people out there in the populace or the public, and it's not something that I think certain people want to have me known, especially men spoken from true heirs. And yes, once again, we are those true heirs for those who have done their genealogy and traced themselves back to the territory that we call Great Britain, or the British Isles and Ireland, Iberian Peninsula, Northern Africa, France, Jerusalem, however you want to slice and dice it. The proof is in, once again, inside the genes. And like we say, the blood don't lie. So with that being said, make sure you hit that notification bell, so that way you are notified when I do go live or when I do upload a video. Also, for those who are involved on the live, make sure you are engaging, because engagement is another way to keep the page moving through the algorithms, now that they kind of got an idea regarding the audience who are listening to this. So I need, especially those of you who are watching and going to be watching in the future, to make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you leave comments. And if you don't like the video, hit the like button anyway. It doesn't matter to me, as long as I do my job and get the information out there as a messenger. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, here we are, chapter 3, the struggle between Rome and Iri or Erie. And when we left off at from chapter 1 and 2, we pretty much were speaking in regards to the history of Iri, or in regards to how it got its name and things of that nature. But moving along, we're going to go ahead and go further in regards to its struggle from, those who are considered the usurpers of the history and the knowledge that's coming from, or the wisdom coming from Ireland, and what happened to them from that struggle. So let's go ahead and pay attention and see what chapter 3 reveals to us. The greatest and the most prolonged struggle in ancient times that we have any account of or reliable tradition of was the war between Rome and Ireland, whose name at that time was Iri. We are told by the priests that it was Scotia, from Scotch or Scove, choice, select, which is only a mythical name alluding to her Magian adepts, or Hebrew priest of the sun. It was only after she was sacked and destroyed, and her sacred altars laid in ruins by the English invaders at the instigation of Rome, that the English priest gave her the name of Ireland, from the end or finish. Pause. So I have to make, and I'm glad that he made it known that this was the instigators of Rome who were utilizing the English to do their dirty work or their deed. So this truly wasn't the English people, quote unquote. They're what's the word I want to say? They're unconscious in regards to what's taking place. They're like what we call casualties of, the occupation that Rome is utilizing or doing at this moment, especially to get into Iri or Erie at the time. All right, so it says, so when they finished their foul work of destruction, the English priest of Rome called her Ireland. The Irish Roman Catholic writers tell their people that was one of her old poetic names. That is rubbish and false. The above is the truth, and it stands. No more either did Tara, the most sacred place on this earth for thousands of years for the whole Aryan race, have its name changed to New Grange, just for a whim. It was changed like so many other Irish names of places, in order that, in the course of time, all memory of its great and important distinction of being the capital of the Lord of the Isles of the Western Sea, Earth's supreme pontiff, might be forgotten. And that's coming from See When the World Will End by Reverend Joseph Wilde. Even in faraway India, the island was known as Haranya, from Irie or Erin, the Isle of the Sun, that is, implying the home of the sun worship and the seat of the great Magian pontiff, the sun's chief representative on earth. Ireland is the great motherland of the Aryan race and the fictitious and fabled Atlantis of Plato. She has suffered too long from the scourge of the invading despoiler. Happily, there is a higher and more enlightened sentiment prevailing in Britain today, which will bring about a better understanding between the two peoples. It is only when the two nations can meet on equal terms that a friendly and harmonious feeling can be cultivated and exist between them. Pause. And that's not just over there in that territory, but that's also America. So there has to become a more perfect union once again, based off of the knowledge, an understanding of who we are, and knowing that the ancient Irish, who we are, were the civilizers or the original civilizers based off of the information they're presenting to us, and that we know that the Irish and the English are related. Like it said, that the Irish, the motherland, suckle or nurse the English. So remember, because we all go back to the original same stock, which they call here in this case Celtic stock. All right. Even if that wasn't the name that the people were known historically, because we know that they were known under many different terms and words, but nevertheless, the information, what they're speaking about, who the folks were known as, which they said used to be Keltoi, but we call Gaels or what they call the Celtic Britonics or whatever, the Britons, is all the same people. All right, so that's something that we have to kind of get, you know, clarity to. And like it says, so therefore we can come on equal terms in the friendly, harmonious feeling once we start realizing that we are one and the same. We are the same. We the same people, you know, like I said, suckle from the same mother in this case. And we have to remember that. So therefore there's no longer any type of divide and conflict that's going on amongst sibling rivalry in this case. All right, let's continue. It is no part of my purpose to add to troubles that are on the way to be amicably settled, but for the sake of establishing the truth and without bias, I must explain the part which Britain has taken in the past in destroying and obscuring Ireland's history and also her religious institutions for the profit of Rome. Although England has also profited by the conquest of the island, it has not been all clear gain, and there have been many occasions since when she has repented that help given to Rome. Pause. So you hear that? So England has been trying to repent for their sins that they caused because of the initiative created by Rome. And we can conclude that in regards to, we know that King Edgar the Peaceful, based off my research, I can conclude that King Edgar the Peaceful did learn from Ireland, or knew the knowledge in regards to ancient Erie or Hibernia, because of, as we can see, the order of Melchizedek or the priesthood of Melchizedek, their attire, all these things are representations of what I remember as I see in the Druidry attire, as well with their rituals per se. So that gave me, and then the intellectual movement, the Benedictine intellectual movement. These were all signs that was also given and shown that yes, King Edgar the Peaceful must knew. And then guess what? Right after King Edgar the Peaceful was no longer the king, England fell into demise. You know, start falling to disarray, and this is when we start having, because of the Norman conquest in 1066. It's just so many issues piled on top of each other, all because of, you know, they forgot their divinity and going back to the original position. All right, so like you said, England had repented the help given to Rome, you know. So we are glad to note there exists in the world today a growing conscience which taboos piracy and cruel bloody conquest, along with disregard for the rights of smaller nations. There have been many seemingly strange upsets in the destiny of nations, one of which is the reversal of position. In the case of England and Ireland, it is a fact, nevertheless, that England is the child or offspring of Ireland, and that was a nursling, so to speak, at the breast of this once great mother, whom she has now persecuted and oppressed for more than 700 years. Let us hope that a better and brighter day is at hand for both Irie and England. The peoples of those islands as well will be shown and are fundamentally of one Celtic stock. The great struggle before mentioned, known as the Punic Wars, are said to have been waged by Rome against Carthage. This fact is only a partial and misleading statement, meant to deceive and which has deceived up to this day. Carthage was an Irish colony, and the name is a mythical one, a compound Irish word, and alludes to man's besetting sin, sexuality. All right, pause. So, as we can see or we read, Carthage itself is a compound word that ties back to Ireland or the Irish. And then it's a mythical term that's pretty much speaking in regards to the sin that man pretty much fell into, which, you know, your biblical stories tell you about. You know, men fall into a lot of perversion, sexuality, and all these things. So philologists have found a striking similarity between Berber and Irish words, even in our own day. Pause. So remember that we constantly keep showing the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica the term Berber, and it told you based off of the megaliths that were found in Ireland, pretty much we say Britain, Iberian Peninsula, Northern Africa. All of these people, they say, technically had to been the same folks based off of the megalithic monuments that was made there. So it makes sense once again that he's saying that they found striking similarity between Berber and Irish words, even in our own day. All right, so that's keep that in mind, brothers and sisters. And then also too, the book that Coleman's Beaumont wrote, The Great Deception, when he spoke and said that Libya was the classical name for Ireland, and the people who encompassed the territory that was known as Libya were Berbers. So it's all coming to, to the light of day to understand who is who, and, to try to see what took place and why. All right, so let's continue reading. The Carthaginian phase was only a part of the struggle. The wars in Gaul and Spain were for the same purpose, namely to destroy the Irish church and to set up a universal church in the papacy in Rome, through the medium of which Rome could rule the entire world. The cause of these wars was said to have been due to the commercial rivalry between Rome and Carthage. This was only incidental to the major purpose stated above. After a struggle lasting for centuries, Rome finally, with the aid of England, succeeded in destroying the Irish church and papacy, but she has so far fallen short of ruling the entire world. This ambition of Rome came to a head and took on a new vigor when the Council of the Churchmen was called by the Roman Emperor Constantine and assembled at Nicaea in the year 325 of our era, known in history as the Council of Nicaea. Those men knew what the Great Pyramid represented and what it was associated with, and our belief is that it was their purpose to destroy it as they did so many of the great temples and monuments of the earlier church. They did not want to leave standing so much visible evidence of the existence of the former religious institution, which they were going to displace with a new one of their own making. So, in every age since, the leaders of the Roman Church have had a conscious knowledge of the part played by their organization in the suppression of all knowledge concerning the history of the Great Pyramid, the purpose for which it was built, and who the builders were. Those astute political priests knew that silence on such matters was the most efficacious way to have them forgotten, and by absorbing the older church and papacy, in a few generations there would be none left among the people who would know anything about such matters. Therefore, the clerical writers have left us an account that is full of falsehood and invention, such as the invasion of the Vandals in Europe, in order to account for the destruction of churches and monasteries, as well as the property of the outraged inhabitants who resisted despoliation and violence at the destruction was carried out by the organized vandals of the new church, worked up into a state of fanatical zeal by the clergy. And what property of the old church they spared was taken over and appropriated, the temples being given new names by the usurpers and used as churches. Through this campaign of destruction and silence, bolstered up by a false history, Rome figured that none would ever know of the part she played in the undermining of the great Irish church or the religion of Isa or Isu or Esau. That is who we call, who they call Jesus, brothers and sisters. Esau was the Irish symbolical savior, crucified on the cross, and from him Rome got her savior, Jesu, or Jesus, substituting the letter J for I. It is translated into the English language as Jesus. It was the worship of Esau more than any other religion that prevailed among the people of Europe at the time the Church of Rome began her mission to plunge the world into ignorance and darkness in order that mankind might forget all of the past. Her intention, no doubt, was to destroy all evidence and she thought she had succeeded well in doing so, by which men in future ages might be able to refute the false and absurd statements which she has given out regarding the source from which she got her Savior Jesus in her Bible. She appropriated them from the Irish, and to cover up this fact, committed the most heinous and awful crimes against mankind. They were crimes which involved persecutions, slaughter, and untold suffering, the misery and effects of which have remained with us to this day. All this was done in order that she could have power and foist upon the world a Savior and a scripture that was taken boldly from the ancient Irish religion and worship. Let's repeat that. It says that all this was done in order that she could have power and foist upon the world a Savior and a scripture that was taken bodily or boldly from the ancient Irish religion. And the so-called Hebrew Bible did not come from any people distinctively known in history as the Hebrews, for there never was such a people. The name Hebrew is derived from Heber, from Ea, fire, an Irish name of the sun. Milesius is the personified son, the father of the Irish race and Irish history, and Heber is his brother. Therefore, he is also a personified attribute of the sun. So a Hebrew is a priest of the fire and a disciple of the sun. It is a secret name for the ancient Irish priest of Esau. It is one of the names by which the church conspirators have camouflaged the ancient Irish priesthood, and by placing the theater of their history and existence over in Palestine, they have up to this day succeeded in making fools of investigators and scholars. So the Christian Bible did not come from India or from Greece or from Persia or from Palestine, but direct from Ireland and his great master priesthood of Esau. Y'all hear this, brothers and sisters? Do y'all hear this? It has been subjected to many additions and alterations both by Roman and by English churchmen behind closed and locked doors, by men pledged to secrecy regarding the things discussed and the manner in which they were to be interpreted and presented to us. The mind of the general reader has been so thoroughly saturated with false information on this and kindred subjects with this digression is necessary to make clear the motives and the course pursued by the Roman papacy, aided by the hierarchy of Britain, which was a part of the Roman Church, to make the substitution of the Irish Savior, Esau, and the Bible possible. In furtherance of that object, it may be said that to the Church of Rome, more than all else can be ascribed the national misfortunes of the Irish race, and owing to lack of knowledge of the true cause of their downfall, the latter-day children of the Gael, fair, white, bright the sun, through the influence and organization of the priests, unwittingly are supporting the institution that are dealt Ireland her death blow. Rome was in her implacable enemy for centuries. She was her nemesis. She raised up enemies against Ireland wherever she could. In the beginning of a later period of history, England was the handmaid of the Roman Church. But in more recent times, the relationship became reversed, and Rome, instead of being the open and avowed enemy, acted as the secret and insidious auxiliary of England in suppressing the aspirations of the Irish people towards realizing the national consciousness for self-government and independence, which was never extinguished in the hearts of the people. And pause. And heart goes back to the Irish, or to Ireland. The term heart goes back to Ireland. And I showed that via my heart surname, or excuse me, my heart inheritance, if I decide to utilize that as part of my given surname or family name, because it's coming from the patrilineal side of my mother, which is my grandfather. My grandfather was a Hart named Wilford Hart. All right. So it says the leaders of the Roman as well as those of the English high church are yet conscious that the star Leviticus still sheds its spiritual influence over the sacred isle, and that it is the homeland of the Bible, and that from the select of that people were the Levites. From lime, a hand signifying the artificer, the disciple or priest of the sun. Hence, the symbolic lamdarg, pronounced labdarg, the red hand of Ulster. This was a spiritual symbol and was used as an insignia of the House of Tyrone. It has never been compatible with the interest of the Roman papacy to act otherwise in our day than as a secret enemy, considering the part which it had taken in aiding Britain in destroying first the independence of the Irish nation as a political and commercial power, and second in her suppression and absorption of the National Irish Church, which up to that time, the year 1169 of our era, had never before been under the sway of Rome, but was of itself the greatest church in the world, independent, and once the great mother church of all who worship the true and living God. Excuse me. Up to the middle of the first century, and pause. And by the way, those who came into Ireland at this time underneath the auspices of utilizing the English was the Normans. And the Normans were working underneath who? William the Conqueror via Rome. So yes, the English are getting, are getting chastised because of this, but they weren't initiators of all. They were just pretty much being used until, like they say, hands flipped, and then Rome became the hidden hand that's that's moving the pieces. All right, so under the lead of the papacy, it required centuries to bring it about. Oops, excuse me, I missed a part. Up to the middle of the first century of our era, it was the most widespread church in all Europe and the Western world. The conquest and absorption of this great church was the constant aim and ambition of the Roman emperors. Under the lead of the papacy, it required centuries to bring it about. It was for this purpose that England was invaded by the Roman arms in order to strike a vital blow at Ireland, which was the seat of power in those islands. England and Scotland had known no other rule up to this time. The Irish Pope and the King was the sovereign lord who ruled from his capital at Tara, and his rule never had been supplanted or displaced in those islands up to this event. It is amusing to see what lapses of memory and what omissions the English and the Romanist writers and chroniclers have had and displayed in trying to dodge this most transparent and unacknowledged fact. In order to avoid mentioning it, they have to gloss it over and ignore it, or throw a hazy and uncertain atmosphere about this part of the early history of Britain. There is one very plain fact which stands out before the student and investigator, and that is that Ireland was the homeland of the Scotic or the Scotic race, that it was from there that those islands were ruled, and that it was this power that Rome had to contend with when she invaded Britain. This fact is omitted by the English church writers because to mention it would need explanations and might show the reason for the Roman invasion. Excuse me. With an amazing inconsistency, they endeavored to show that the Irish made their initial conquest in Britain as late as about the year 240 AD. Of course, this is plainly not so, for at this time the Irish power is on the decline, and at this period the Irish are not making any new conquests, but striving to hold on to what they have always been in possession of against the Roman invaders. We find them occupying not only the south and west parts of Britain, but also the east in Cornwall, and what there were of the Scots, Irish, there at this time was a people converted into the status of a garrison, mostly on the defensive in the east of Britain and in Cornwall. In the west and north, as well as in the southwest, they were unconquered. So, instead of this being the beginning of the Scotic power in Britain, as it would have us believe, it was the declining period. They were approaching the end of their long reign in that country, which was ended in the west and north of Britain only, long after the invasion of the Jutes and Saxons. Even these barbarians in time yielded to Irish culture, which still remained the greatest intellectual leaven in the island and became civilized. All right, Paul. So it says that the Saxons and the Jutes, they recognized the Irish culture as one of the greatest. So this means that many people revered what the Irish, or those known as the Aryans, were. All right. And it seems that Rome was utilizing many different nations' military power to try to get through. Brilliant Irish monks and scholars kept this culture alive. And during the 8th and ninth and 10th centuries, many of them were engaged as teachers and instructors in the establishments of Saxon princes in Britain. You hear that? This was a growing cause of alarm at Rome. Paul. So let's go ahead and go back when I was speaking in regards to King Edgar the Peaceful. King Edgar the Peaceful was an Anglo-Saxon. He was an Anglo-Saxon king. So like I said, King Edgar the Peaceful had to have been learning from the Irish, because who? The first or the original churches in England came from the first Christian churches in England, in the north, they came from the Irish monasteries, and the Irish monasteries were more pure in their teaching approach because they have never been infiltrated by Rome. All right, even though they were teaching Christianity, which is called Celtic Christianity, which is known as the indigenous or the original Christianity in the territory that we call the British Isles. All right, so the Irish, or the Aryans, because that's what they are, the Aryans or the Orions, those who could be traced back to ancient Atlantis. These were the teachers of the world, and they were teaching, once again, the Anglo-Saxon kings and princes. This was a growing cause of alarm at Rome. So the Irish were the original people of those islands. You hear this? These are the facts which seem to escape British writers, but somehow they find no difficulty in inventing fables to bolster up any supposition which they wish to advance and to give to the color of history. And color means like artificial, not real. It's false. Rome brought the war to Britain because it was territory which was occupied and ruled over by the Irish Pope King. And it was to crush this church power that his territory of Britain was invaded. To obtain the coveted prize of the popedom, which was held by the Irish rulers, was the great ambition which the emperors of heads of the Roman state church sought to accomplish. There is no doubt whatever but that it was for the purpose of bringing this about that the Danes and the Norwegians were induced to make raids upon and attack the Scots, both in Ireland and Scotland, and in the islands of the surrounding seas. See, pause. So like I told you, Rome was utilizing other various nations to infiltrate, to get into the nucleus. Later, they raided both Roman and Celt alike, as the motive was neither plunder or conquest. We are satisfied that Rome did not stop at employing any means she could find to carry out her ends. By their character, ye shall know them. We find the Danes and the Northmen attacking Ireland in the first half of the 9th century, and no doubt they did effect establishments in some of the seaports like Dublin and Waterford. Although they came as foes, in time many of them became assimilated with the Irish population, but the constant urge of Rome kept bringing them on from time to time. For the next 100 years, fresh hordes of Vikings came until their final defeat at Clontarf in the year 1014 AD. In the years 991 to 994, we find Olaf Tryggvason in England. We are told that he was there converted to Christianity, or in other words, he became an avowed partisan of Rome. We immediately again find him in Ireland at war with the Irish. Pause. So remember, King Edgar the Peaceful, his death was in 975, something like that. And clearly, like I said, the House of Wessex, as we can see during that time, was not fighting against Ireland. Actually, it is said, based off of history, that it was multiple kings who had pledged their allegiance to King Edgar the Peaceful. All right. So if that was the case, if they was pledging their allegiance to King George the Peaceful, that means the King George the Peaceful vowed to protect the people in the British Isles, the territory that he called what? The Empire of Albion, also including Ireland or Hibernia, Erin, which she historically was known before she was ransacked and had her name changed. He left Dublin to become king of the Norway in 995 AD and to make good his espousal of the Roman cause. He forced his people by the terror of the sword to embrace Romanism, or the so-called Christianity. A writer, evidently a churchman, in an Encyclopedia Britannica, page 556, Art, Norway, in the apologetical vein says of his exemplifier of Roman methods of proselyting, he had been baptized sometime during his English expedition and had taken up Christianity in a more serious manner than was generally the case with the northern converts of his class, who, as a rule, submitted to baptism as a convenient or necessary transaction. All right, Paul. So remember, a lot of them had converted over, and even them converting over, that didn't change their nature in regards to what they were originally there doing. It was just making it easier for them to continue their enterprise under the guise of Christianity. And in an incredibly short time, if he had not exactly succeeded in making his subjects Christian, he had at least made it very unsafe for them to be anything else. Exactly. So you had to convert, because if you didn't, your life was in jeopardy. By force or gifts, by persuasion, or even by torture if necessary, for his anger was sometimes cruel enough, he soon scarcely left a man of note unbaptized in Norway. Now, I should say that this Olaf was a very apt convert, and that he imbibed the spirit of Roman Christianity according to example of his own mission to Ireland as an ally of Rome. Pause, like I said. They only converted to Christianity to still be able to keep doing what they were doing under the guise of Christianity. But that didn't mean that they changed. And surely took his baptism and his lesson well, despite the faint praise of this cleric who seems on the whole pleased with the work he accomplished. Any bishop would be. He says further, perhaps the strangest thing is not merely that he attained his end so rapidly, but that he did so without rousing and alienating the people. His splendid personal appearance, his wonderful strength and skill in arms, his exhaustible courage and energy, and the frank, chivalrous nature, bright and joyous when in quiet, but capable of terrible passion when enraged, seemed to have attracted everyone at the time. This writer stresses exceedingly in trying to portray this fiend and ruffian in qualities which might make him acceptable to anyone worthy to be called human. There is a very good and sufficient reason why the people were attracted to him, because they were in his power. We read of him in the Bible Myths, T.W. Doane, page 449. Even among the Norwegians, the Christian sword was unsheathed. They clung tenaciously to the worship of their forefathers, and numbers of them died real martyrs for their faith, after suffering the most cruel torments from their persecutors. It was by sheer compulsion that the Norwegians embraced Christianity. The reign of Olav Tryggvason, a Christian king of Norway, was in fact entirely devoted to the propagation of the new faith by means most revolting to humanity. His general practice was to enter a district at the head of a congress of the freemen and give the people the alternative of fighting with him or of being baptized. Most of them, of course, prefer baptism to the risk of a battle with an adversary so well prepared for combat, and the recusants were tortured to death with fiend-like ferocity and their estates confiscated. This explains why the people were not alienated from this Roman apostle, despite the apology of his clerical admirer and eulogist. Thus is shown the purpose and the object of a Norse and Danish incursions into Ireland. Priestly fictions and inventions have had their day, and it would be too bad indeed if such silly falsehoods as have heretofore been accepted, should forever, as they were intended and expected to do, prevent mankind from getting a true and clear insight into the motives which were back of those invasions and which led up to those historic occurrences. The motives are, as shown and most obvious, and enlightened men will accept and acknowledge them. These writers serve up a myth as history which contains an idea cloaked or hidden for the express purpose of deceiving the people as a whole. Here's an example. It is from English history as written by the priests and shows the way in which they have blinded the people and kept the truth under cover for their own benefit. In English history, we are told that after the Roman forces were withdrawn from Britain, the country was overrun by Scots and Picts, and that a British prince or duke by the name of Vortigern invited the German tribes to come in and take possession of the country. The Angles, Saxons, and Jutes came under the leadership of the two brothers, Hengist and Horsa. We are told that warfare ensued for about 40 years. Of the two brothers, Horsa was killed in a battle with Vortigern. After this happens, Hengist and his son Asi seized the royal purple and became kings. A writer of the history topic England in the Encyclopedia Britannica, 9th edition, page 269, very naively says, in all this, there is nothing like romance. It is a matter-of-fact kind of history which might be preserved by a runic chronicle, which might almost be preserved by tradition. It is not quite so straightforward and simple as a tale as he would have us believe. It was not meant to be, as we will show in what follows. Vortigern is a Celtic or Irish word with the first syllable inflected. It is an alteration of the word Morthirania or Morthiana. Excuse me, this is a hard way for me to pronounce it. Morthiana. All right, so it's an alteration of the word Morthiana. The T is silent and the M is inflected, as it is common in the Celtic, and it is given the sound of a V. The word is phonetically pronounced Vorgiern or Vorgiern, and signifies a great lord, a prince or ruler, So the word is phonetically pronounced Vorgiern and signifies a great lord, a prince or ruler. The 40 years in which the warfare is said to go on is the sacred number 40. The term of years in each incarnation or life in which a religious man is theoretically in a battle with himself to overcome his lower nature, his passions and desires. Pause. And I'm glad they said that, brothers and sisters, because it's dealing with religion and it's telling about man and dealing with his battles in regards to his lower nature, his passions and desires. Well, the number 40 deals with who? Saturn. Saturn's number is number 40. Saturn is who? The great father. Saturn is the disciplinarian. Saturn is the one who makes you disciple. Saturn is who does what? Create kings. All right, let's continue. So Hengist is formulated from the Celtic word Ang, a name of the sun, and personified as it is here, it signifies a worshiper of the sun, a leader, a bishop. An ancient Irish mythical lore, and I am Archbishop Belmont. In ancient Irish mythical lore, the sun is said to have a charioteer or horseman. The Celtic word for horse is each, hence Eactor, the valiant man of deeds, anglicized as Hector. In this myth, he is presented to us very nicely disguised in English dress, so that you do not quite recognize him as Horsa, also a priest of the sun, who is also a leader and a bishop. Isaac or Isaac is an abbreviation of the Irish word Isbach. It is the name of an order or degree of an ancient Irish priesthood of Esau, and is the name word for bishop. So we are informed under a heavy layer of converting that Isaac or Isaac was a bishop also and a spiritual leader of an invading horde to rob and slay the people of Britain in order to enable the Roman Church to maintain the foothold it had secured and it was about to lose. Excuse me, let me repeat that. So we are informed under a heavy layer converting that Ash, because that's how you pronounce that, Ash was a bishop also and a spiritual leader of the invading horde to rob and slay the people of Britain in order to enable the Roman Church to maintain a foothold it had secured and it was about to lose. In the covert language of the myth, the high priest, hierophant, or demigod is always a prince, duke, lord, or nobleman. The facts of this bit of a mythical history, to state it in open manner, is that the head of the Roman Church in Britain, carrying out the instructions of his master in Rome, instigated the two German tribes to invade England under the leadership of their two bishops, of whom Horsa was slain in battle, and Hengist and Ash, the successor of Horsa, more fortunately survived. In time, they grasped royal power and became kings. The truth about the invasion is that there were only two German tribes as such engaged in it, though there is no doubt but that there were many adventurers encouraged to join with them in the undertaking through the persuasion of the Roman emissary priests. These two tribes were the Jutes and Saxons. The so-called tribe of Angles is a fiction invented by the Anglophile writers of a later day. It is part of a plot to obscure the Celtic or Gaelic element, which is the greatest in the composition of the English race. Let's repeat that. I'm going to repeat that one last time for those in the back. These two tribes were the Jutes and Saxons. The so-called tribe of Angles is a fiction invented by the Anglophile writers of a later day. It is part of a plot to obscure the Celtic or the Gaelic element, which is the greatest in the composition of the English race, and to unduly emphasize the German element, which is comparatively small and almost non-existent today, with the exception of some of the nobility in the reigning family. Pause. So once again, the original people, the original English people, the original people of Great Britain didn't have as much of this so-called outside foreign German element that we have been told, especially when it comes down to those who are known as the Anglo-Saxons. Even if the term Anglo or Anglo is a fiction invented, we can still accept, which we already know, that the English people themselves exist. The English identity exists. The English people are real. But the element that makes us English, that truly gave us our identity, is the Gaelic or the Celtic element, and not the so-called element that they say is coming from the German so-called side, when they say the German Saxons and all this and that. All right. So that is now us clearing up that confusion, because a lot of people have been trying to figure out what's the German or the Germanic aspect of us. That was created. That's all falsified information to remove the what? The angelic or the godly aspect, the Gaelic, the Gaels. And El, we know, is representation of who? Of God, Saturn. All right, so we ain't gonna go too far into that. But as we can see from what they're speaking, which we now, or which we should have known, that the English mostly is composed of the Gaelic element that's there. This bias was very pronounced during the reign of Queen Victoria. The fact that her consort was a German prince gave added impetus to propaganda which had already been long and forced to suppress or belittle everything of Celtic cultural nature. So it became popular to claim that whatever was of excellence in English life was due to the German element in the race. This false impression was helped to become fixed in the popular mind by just such invention of spurious history and by giving out false accounts regarding events of the past, which as the story of the Angles being a German tribe. The false impression was purposely made upon the mind of the English people that the term Anglo-Saxon meant that they were a race of German descent. This is a delusion which had been diligently fostered. The propagation of this fiction came to a sudden stop when the World War began. But since the war, the same propaganda, the same systematic falsehood and misrepresentation has been in evidence. It has found a voice through our American press. I took the matter up in a letter, the salient points of which I here give, which I sent to a leading newspaper. The letter was published under the caption, says, English are Celtic in blood as well as in speech. Let's repeat that. English are Celtic in blood as well as in speech. This statement was apparently so radically at variance with the claims of the propagandists that it might well be expected to bring forth a reply, or that an attempt at contradiction would be made if possible. No reply came because the propagandists might well have considered that it was a dangerous subject, and the more discussion it received, the greater it would be the exposure of the false history which has been so extensively written and circulated. The letter, in part, is as follows. Let's pay attention, brothers and sisters. Don't forget, for those who are reading or watching, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. All right, so it says, in a recent issue, I read the statement that Celtic hardly exists in the English language and still less in the English blood. I wish to refute this statement. It is absolutely false. The basis of the English speech is undeniably Celtic, and it cannot very well be eradicated without destroying the English language. Any person laying the least claim to scholarship should know that fact. The above quoted statement savors very much of the fashion in vogue with English writers of the Victorian era to eschew everything Celtic and claim affinity with the German cousin. But the rough handling the British troops received at the Battle of Mons and subsequently opened the eyes of the English people to the true fact that Celtic blood was the basis of the English race. Now that the war's over, the same evil tactics of division and dissension are being employed to keep the English and the Irish peoples apart by means of hatred and animosity, as if there were nothing of kinship between them of old. Oh my God. Oh my God. You brothers and sisters don't understand that this revelation that is happening right here. No one else is speaking this. There is a reason why my page is being shadow banned. Because the heirs are speaking, is bringing the truth to light. The true trustees, the true heirs from the territory that we call the British Isles, including Ireland, who can trace themselves going back to those who part of the great cataclysm, the age of catastrophe. We are those. And you should be passionate hearing this. I'm passionate speaking it because it goes to show you that the English are not against the Irish, because we are one and the same. We are family. Those in the British Isles, we historically, the only reason why we got kicked out because we were infighting. We were fighting each other and not realizing you are one. And now we have to go back to the understanding which I'm trying to do and reveal to those who have the ability to listen to me and to be able to see me. Know that this is our obligation. The duty is to become one once again and heal this planet through truth, through love, through understanding, through compassion, empathy, and to be able to heal each other as the noble family once again. And it does not come in a particular so-called complexion. That is all part of the divide. When it's not about that, it's about good versus evil. And we know that there has been a plethora and a multitude of evil that has been taking place that has been dividing the good people. We must now revert and go back to the original position by understanding who we are. And the only way for you to be able to do that, you must be still and go into a private place and return to the center of your heart and ask these questions. So therefore you'll be led onto the quest of remembrance. So you can remember, aka come back into the body of the people, come back to full life by honoring those who put their life on the line for you to be able to have life today. And your freedom is all within your name, just by remembering and going back once again to the original position of who these people were and going back to the spiritual nature that they were. I digress. Let's continue. I don't want to get too off into that because, like I said, I'm passionate about this, brothers and sisters. You have no idea how long that we have been trying to find out who we are and being led astray because of nefarious powers who have an agenda to keep us divided, so therefore we can keep this planet sick. All right, so let's continue. Now that the war is over, the same evil tactics of division and dissension are being employed to keep the English and Irish peoples apart by means of hatred and animosity, as if there were nothing of kinship between them of old. The common people of Ireland and England never had a quarrel with one another. Dean Swift, a Protestant of Dublin, tried to get the Irish people to compose their differences by citing a case such as this to them. Why should men quarrel because one wanted his eggs boiled soft and the other wanted his boiled hard? No real cause for a quarrel. I am glad to see the growing union of political sentiment between the Irish representatives and the Labour Party of England, which represents the democratic and progressive elements of the English people. I feel that they are, for the best good of all, determined to give justice to Ireland exactly in order that friendship and mutual confidence may exist where formerly hatred and mistrust prevailed. I would advise our English, Irish, and Scottish brothers to look askance at anybody who would try to sow seeds of dissension among them. I agree. And this is what I'm explaining, brothers and sisters. We are one. Anyone who's trying to divide that, you need to pay attention and ask and see what their agenda is. Remember, we have to exist here on this planet as a whole. What I breathe, you breathe. The water that I need to maintain life, you need. The land that I need for me to be able to exist, you need. The sun that gives us the life energy, the life force of this planet, we all need that. So them up putting chemicals in the sky to block that, that is an injustice to all of us. Not just one, but a justice to all of us and all life on this planet. Now, as to whether there is any Celtic in the English language, let me cite just a few well-beloved words of common everyday English speech. We will take first the English word all. Its root derivation is Celtic and means universal, great, mighty, a race, a generation, all. Next, take altitude. The root of this word is the Celtic word alt, meaning a high place or eminence. Then the English word river. The root of it is the Celtic word re, meaning to run, ria, running. Hence our name for a brook, a run. Another Celtic name for river is Amhan, pronounced Awen. Hence, by corruption of English pronunciation, we have Stratford on Avon. That is Stratford on the river, Shakespeare's home. Then take London. The name is Celtic. It is a compound of two Celtic words, Lan, strong, and Dun, a fort or city. Hence, London, strong city. Next, the English word lion, a word dear to every Englishman. The root of it is the Celtic word leo, meaning a limb, member, strength. Hence, lion or leon. Lat, Leo, is derived from the same source as Latin, is a daughter of the Celtic. The word rose is taken from the Celtic word ros, meaning bright, shining, pleasant, agreeable. The word red, the color of the English flag, is taken from the Celtic ru, or rock. The Germans also got the word from the same source. Then we come to the Englishman's sobriquet, John Bull. It is surely a Celtic word. It means the fructifier, the male principle. The Celtic word is Baal. The Scottish call it Baal, and the English bull. Now, dear sir, while the impulse is still strong to proceed further, I think that I have advanced enough of evidence to show the great Celtic foundation of English speech, that it is rooted in the Celtic mother tongue. It is the same with English blood. It is mostly Celtic. And while it is not my purpose to go into this at length, I will briefly say that while the English people were at different times inoculated with a strain of other blood, it has long since been eliminated. For it is the same with a race as it is with the earth itself. It reverts back to its first principles. The tail cannot wag the dog. Pause. Like I told you, brothers and sisters, you are going to return to the original position in regards to what you were designed and what you were supposed to be based off of the original blood that's in you. And now that the planet right now is operating at a higher vibration because of the amount of energy that's plaguing us via the light, we're receiving a lot more centrinos that's bombarded the planet. Things are changing. Our DNA is moving at a faster vibration, which means that those of us who were here at the time of the planet when it was original position are starting to get that call. Those who have more of a concentrated element of the blood, which, as you can see, no matter how much a foreign blood comes in, the original blood still is going to revert back to its original principles. The English people have been able to assimilate every strain which has come among them, hence their virility. I will conclude in the words of Shakespeare: there are stranger things in this world, Horatio, than you or I wot of. What is now called England, from time immemorial occupied by the Celtic or the Gaelic race. In the Gaelic tongue, the name of the race is Angadel or Angadel, pronounced with the D silent, Angel or angel, signifying the Gaels. So pause. So we're, like we said, we are the angels, and they corrupted the name or the term by changing it to English or Angle. We're angels, the angels, the angels. And like Pope, was a Pope Augustine or one of them, it was someone, I can't remember, but they were talking about the Anglo-Saxons and they said angles, and he said no, angels. So they knew that it wasn't so-called angles, but it's actually truly angels. And I always keep calling you brothers, sisters, what? Fallen angels, because you forgot. We forgot. All right? We all forgot. And we're now getting the truth based off of what we're reading right here. This country, then, as most natural consequence of the name of the race which occupied it, was known to the Germans as Angel Land, or the country of the Gaels, or the Gaels. The name has persisted and has never been changed except in so far as the corruption of English pronunciation has made the slight change phonetically from Angel Land to Angleland, and finally to its modern form, England. The name is truly derived from its ancient race, the Gaels or Gaels, in a most obvious and natural manner. So the term Anglo-Saxon, which a few have so ardently cultivated, has unwittingly served but to perpetuate the memory of Anglelands or Angel Lands, ancient people, while the covert purpose was to suppress all knowledge of this important fact. The fiction of the story of the Angles as being one of the invading tribes may be easily understood also by the fact that in the cryptic account given of the invasion, an account written by the priests, there were only two leaders or bishops mentioned, Hengist and Horsa, one for each tribe. If there had been three tribes instead of two, there would have been three bishops at their head to lead them, for it was always the bishop who assumed power and leadership. This fact is shown in the narrative that on the death of Bishop Horsa, his successor Bishop Ash and Bishop Hengist grasped royal power and became kings. Ash is called the son of Hengist only in a religious sense, as he was created or made bishop by the latter, and hence is his son. This illustrates how little dependence can be placed on some of the history that has come down to us from the priests. It is most unreliable, and a great deal of it is pure falsehood and fable, especially that which has come to us from English and Roman writers. So we see the work of Rome in the Jew and Saxon invasion of England always pursuing the same object, the conquest and acquisition of the Irish church. No one needs to entertain a doubt about this fact. Later on, when disputes arose in England between the church and king, we find Pope Hildebrand urging William of Normandy, that's William the Conqueror, cousin William, to overthrow the English king, and that was who? That was King Edward the Confessor, who was the original king. And then the battle of the Norman Conquest via the Battle of 1066, it was between Baldwin or Harold Bluetooth, one or the other, Harold Baldwin and William the Conqueror. And clearly they lost. William the Conqueror won. All right, so the result proved that so later in the reign of Henry II of England, who aided Rome to reach her long-sought goal, the conquest of Ireland and the suppression and absorption of the Irish National Church of Esau, its institutions, Savior, and Bible. Although Rome had grown great in power by the time that she invaded Britain, she still had a difficult struggle ahead of her. She found that the closer she came to Ireland, where the Irish were, near their base of supplies, the more stubborn became the opposition. After a period of occupancy of 400 years or so, the invasion of England failed to bring Ireland and the Irish church under her power. At about the latter part of the 4th century, disintegration within and invasion from without forced her to cease for the time her warfare on the Irish, Scots, and Picts, who are the same race, from the north, and caused Rome to withdraw her forces from Britain, never to return as an armed state power. But the Roman Church had in that period become established in England. It got a firm foothold in the occupied territory. It had not yet spread to Wales or Scotland, but she had accomplished one part of her mission, to destroy the Irish church and thereby enable herself to set up a universal papacy in Rome. It remained for time and circumstance to enable her to accomplish the former. The latter ambition has never been fully realized. While the Irish nation was confronted with the menace of invasion and conquest by Roman armies, it remained united and invincible against the mightiest power on earth. Although the ranks of the population must have been pretty well depleted of material for military service, after centuries of warfare, they succeeded in preserving their political and spiritual independence. They survived, perhaps the longest period of continued military strain, which any people of like numbers were ever subjected to. But with the removal of the menace of Roman invasion, reaction set in. The relaxation from the necessities and the rigors incident to constant war gave the people opportunity to apply themselves to the occupations of a peaceful life and to cultivate the arts and sciences which had been neglected, and many of which had no doubt been forgotten. They also cultivated the spiritual life, which was in abeyance during the centuries of warfare. And that's what's going on now, to pause, and that's what's taking place today. There's a lack of a true spirituality. This stuff that folks call being spiritual, that's not real. That's false. The true spirituality that was here on this, especially in this territory in the West before the fall, all of that is almost non-existent. And if it does exist, it's in a very small, minute area, and it's time for it to be revitalized. In the succeeding centuries, Ireland became again, as the former ages, the center of learning and the home of the sciences, which she was in the beginning, before the first migration of the Irish or Aryan race towards the east, or the rising sun, for they were truly the children of light and knowledge. After the withdrawal of the Roman forces from Britain, it was the purpose of the Irish Pope King, through the medium of the monastic orders, to spread knowledge and science throughout all the countries of Europe. But this was in direct conflict with the policy of Rome, which is to spread ignorance and darkness. She did not want the history of the past to be known. It would interfere with her purpose and defeat it. The Irish church hoped to regain some of the lost ground after the withdrawal of the Roman armies from Britain, and eventually would have done so had not Rome succeeded in raising up new enemies against her. In the German tribes of the Jutes and Saxons, she found willing allies. They were won over by Rome to invade England, as the spoils were enticing. Irish missionaries went again to the continent and endeavored to spread the light. John Donne Scotus, the Irish were called Scots, founded a monastery and school at the Ratisbon on the Danube. Many went to other places, but all to no purpose, as the opposition of Rome was too strong to overcome. The loot of the Irish church was yet to be obtained. Later, we are told some of them were received at the court of Charlemagne, for the Irish Pope was still the lord of the Isles of the Western Sea. But the alluring inducements offered by the Rome appealed more to Charlemagne's cupidity and ambition for power. And Charlemagne, being a politician, went with Rome and became emperor. He then embarked on a war of religious conquest with the sword against the Germans in order to force them to bow to the Roman church yoke and relinquish their adherence to the Celtic church. This practically put an end to any chance of success for the mission of the Irish monks on the continent. All who now wished for education and higher learning had to go to Ireland for it, and thither they went by the thousands and were welcome. They were domiciled and given both food and tuition free. This continued from the period shortly following the withdrawal of the Roman forces from England until the coming of the Danes and the Northmen to Ireland. It was during this period of the revival of learning that the Irish masters are said to have laid the foundation of our modern university system, of which such great schools as Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Dartmouth, Cornell, and other parts are part. Let us give credit where credit is due. This is not the beginning, but only the renaissance of Irish learning on the continent of Europe, as British writers would have us believe. There is on par with their juggling a fact regarding the occupancy and rule of Britain by the Irish Pope kings previous to the Roman invasion. The Irish Magian priesthood had always had this great learning. It was handed down through a secret cult of adepts from time immemorial. It was this which enabled them to erect the immense and perfectly proportioned Great Pyramid of Giza. It should not be any surprise to us that learning fell into the state of decline during the great struggle with Rome. It could not very well be cultivated under such conditions. Yet, however much diminished, it was never extinguished. Pause. And that's going on today too, brothers and sisters, because we are still technically in wartime, because we have never been relinquished as being the descendants of prisoners of war, because no one came and brought you your identity to come and bring you back to your full self until the king had returned. And as you see, and you're going to learn, the Third Temple English Church of England is actually the Irish aspect of the English indigenous church, because as you can see, the English and Irish are one and the same. So we're bringing our brothers and sisters home through the intelligence, through the knowledge that we were anointed through birth, through the blood, to do this lifetime. And it's up to you to make a choice in regards to what you want to do, because this intellectual movement is not going anywhere. It's always going to be here, because as long as the people are here, the intelligence must be here. We are all living witnesses of the great inroads which were made in the ranks of the undergraduates in our own colleges during 1.5 years of warfare in the late World War. We may well ponder on what the conditions would have been if the war had continued for 10 or 20 years, to say nothing of several centuries of warfare. We all felt keenly the shortages in supplies and the scarcity of many articles of use in which manufacture seized, owing to the fact that the nation's energy and manpower was being directed to the manufacture and production of the things that were used solely for the prosecution of the war. If this continued for a great length of time, we can easily see where many of the arts and sciences, in fact, culture in general, would have been neglected and as a natural result forgotten. When we think what a comparatively small nation Ireland was in those days beside mighty Rome, we may well think it is a miracle that learning did not perish from the island altogether. It is to this island we must look for the original source from which our learning and science came. Here is where it was first conceived, nurtured, and cultivated, and from here it spread throughout the entire world. Her sacred literature has been pilfered by Rome, and her learning and mythology handed over and accredited to Greece by these same English Romanist tricksters. And the mythology which they have stolen and handed over to Greece, they have covered up and secretly preserved for their own knowledge, the very source from which it came. For as the Greeks said, they do not where their traditions came from, for they were strange to them. Of course they were strange and are so yet, except to the knowing ones. The names of the gods and goddesses have been changed to some extent to suit the purpose of the deception. For instance, Anna is the mother of the Irish gods, and we find her accredited to Greeks for her temple at Ephesus. Her statue that of a female figure crowned and with many breasts to suckle her children. She is presented as conceived and personified by the Irish priest philosophers as the many-breasted mother of the gods. She is the female principle of deity, the great mother which sustains all life. They made her over as Diana, God Anna, and Rome has stolen her and translated her into Saint Anne, the mother of Mary, from the Irish Moere, or More, which means the sea, and the grandmother of Iusus, or Isis, the grandmother of Esau, or Iusus, which is known as Jesus. It is irrefutable. They have taken the Irish Hercules, the personified son, from her, meaning above, and Q, meaning wolfhound or swift, the high swift one, and made him into Heracles. Under the guise of the myth, when this god goes to Ireland and places himself on Mount Abbas, Ab, a father or pope, and kills Guryan, an Irish name of the sun and always connected with the sun worship. The Irish pope and father, representative of the sun and the head of his worshippers on earth. He steals cattle and brings them to Italy. Do we not here find a hidden allusion to the fact that the new Heracles took possession of the Irish papacy and the rest of the plunder he brought to Italy as cattle? The myth states that Hercules went to Erythea, an island somewhere in the remote west beyond the Pillars of Hercules, where was a giant named Guryan, Irish Grian, the glowing aspect. When Hercules reached the island, he placed himself on Mount Abbas. Guryan has cattle which at night he keeps in a dark cave in the remote west. Hercules slays Guryan and ships the cattle into the vessel of the sun, and landing them safely drives them through Iberia, Gaul, and across the Alps into Italy. Murray's Manual of Mythology, page 292 to 293. Those writers do not mention the fact that Irie was the island in the west and the home of the sun worship referred to in the myth. Erythea is but a name for Irie under camouflage spelling. The root of the word is Ire, the west, the western isle, behind which the sun sets. The goddess Ceres is also Irish and means the earth. There is no letter K in the Celtic alphabet, and C has the sound of the English K. The word in Irish is pronounced Ceres, while in English it has the soft sound as Ceres. This difference in spelling and sound has been taken advantage of and utilized in carrying out the deception. We declare without fear of successful contradiction that Ireland is the homeland of these myths and the island alluded to in the west. Even Olympus, the seat of the Greek gods, is a compound Irish name with the Greek ending. It is formed by combining the words Olum, a doctor or professor of science, and Phys, wisdom, hence Mount Olympus, the mount of wisdom and the seat of the gods. For of course the gods are full of wisdom. This seat has been translated to Greece from Ireland. Sishon at Tyre was Mount Olympus, or as the name implies, head or seat of wisdom, the supreme pope. It never was in Greece. The whole scheme is quite plain and clear when it is pointed out. The wonder is that somebody did not discover it. The wonder is that somebody did not discover it before. Now that it is all plain, especially to the scholar who can read and translate Irish and recognize idioms, a new perspective appears before us. The name Tara implies the father, and read it the other way, and it spells Arat, a divine man. We are led to believe that this deception was well known to the Lord Bacon, for he said the mythology of the Greeks, which their eldest writers do not pretend to have invented, was no more than a light air which had passed from a more ancient people into the flutes of the Greeks, which they modulated to such descants as best suited their fancies. It's coming from Atlantis, page 283. It is no surprise at all to us that a plot was hatched up against Bacon and that he was put to death. He gave out too much to be tolerated by unscrupulous and designing persons. Such candor and plain speaking was quite contrary to the purpose of the English government and hierarchy, and such frankness, if not suppressed, would be fatal to the statecraft and policy of the men who were shaping England's future in an ambitious age. This may have been the cause of his being put to death, for he betrayed state secrets, although malfeasance in office was the charge made against him. However, we still see the successors of those men sitting in the House of Lords as my Lord Bishop, keeping in close touch with the pulse beats of the British state. Ireland has been terribly mistreated through the selfishness of Rome and England. I hope that in this enlightened age, when the spirit of inquiry is abroad in search of truth, that men and women will not let prejudice or preconceived ideas formed in the absence of fuller knowledge stand in the way of the acceptance of the truths herein stated, though called to their attention for the first time. It is surely time, in the name of righteousness, that justice be done, and as far as possible that the great wrong may be redressed by allowing the great Aryan mother, metaphorically speaking, to rise to her feet and to set her own house in order. Scholars and investigators have been very much led astray in the past by accepting as facts Roman and British fiction dressed up in the sober and matter-of-fact garb of history. Those inventors of history would have us direct our attention to any other country than to Ireland. Such complete silence on the part of the art conspirators surely did arouse a such suspicion, which upon investigation has yielded such splendid and most convincing proofs of the foulest plot in all human annals. This plot not only comprehended the pilfering of all the appurtenances of the Irish Church of Esau, the Bible, Savior Esau, aka Jesus' property, and institutions, literatures, etc., but also the suppression of the Irish language and finally the annihilation or dispersion of the race. We have been told through Roman and British sources that our learning came from some Asiatic country, exactly. Perhaps Assyria, Persia, or Arabia, Greece, or Egypt itself. Any one of these countries will serve equally well the purpose of the arch plotters who came so near to killing off the Irish race that only a small remnant of it was left to survive at one time. They were so reduced in numbers and circumstances that there was no thought in the minds of the English rulers of those days that they would ever again increase in numbers or advance in enlightenment to any extent, or at least ever be able to offer any serious resistance to English rule in Ireland. The priests were employed in writing and concocting a false history, one that would not contain any mention of the nature of her former greatness, or the achievements and discoveries for which the whole civilized world is indebted to her. The very discoveries of the arts and sciences, credit for which discoveries would make any people great, were denied her in the new histories, and the credit has been given mainly to Greece, with other transfers already mentioned. But we say, that it was in Ireland that our civilization arose, and that it was there that the cereals were developed from the grasses. It was on this island that barley was first grown, the grain that is particularly associated with the life of an abstemious priesthood. Here we find also the birthplace of mathematics, geometry, navigation, astronomy, medicine, chemistry, and the arts which are commonly called Egyptian. British lexicographers and others taking their cue from them and giving the derivation of the word chemistry refer to the Egyptian, Greek, Latin, or even a Dutch or German root for it. But Cleland, quoted in Webster's dictionary, derives it from the Celtic root word chem, chemistry, chem, fire, which is the true derivation, as fire is the chemical agency in all nature. The Celtic master adepts established that science on this true basis. It was in Ireland that the sciences were brought to perfection, and the names under which this fact is masked, such as Egyptian, Chaldean, Phoenician, Cushite, Ethiopian, etc., are only names devised by the priests to deceive. This will be shown later on. Exactly, pause. So once again, there has been many code terms or covert words that has been created to mask a lot of the truth and secrecy. And only those who have, like they say, who has been initiated either within their so-called secret societies or those who have been divinely initiated through the Most Highs, like it says, the inner thing is the blood. Those will be the ones who will be able to see and pierce through the veil of secrecy to be able to know and understand and to decode what actually has been hidden. And what has been hidden, pretty much, it ties to you. All right, so let's continue. And so far, we've been here for about an hour and a half, so I'm not sure how much longer into this book, into this chapter. But once we're done with this chapter, I think I'm going to stop and then do a part 3 later. So hopefully part 1 and part 2 is enough for you brothers and sisters to go back for it, watch, listen to, digest, and then start doing your own work, because this movement, this intellectual movement of light, truth, is not stopping. It's going to continue to keep moving. And each and every day that passes, more information is going to come that hopefully you've done your research in regards to keeping up. So therefore that you can come along on this shift that's about to be taking place. So Ireland in those days was the mistress of the seas and the great commercial and trading nation of the world. Pause. Her vessels and intrepid seamen visited the harbors and ports of every sea where trade and barter was carried on. Atlantis is the name under which these plotters have sought to sink Ireland and bury her great past in oblivion of the bed of the ocean. The name Atlantis was formulated for this very reason, and to secretly signify and commemorate her past. The word Atlantis signifies the illustrious land of wisdom. It is a compound Irish name, composed of 3 words and justifiably applied to Ireland, but it has been done secretly by the British priests of Rome, as one of many inferred from the fact that they have this Isle of Atlantis lying at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. At means illustrious, land means land or church, and tis means wisdom. It is a camouflage name for the sacred island in the great Magian priesthood. Cleland used the English form in spelling the word by using the letter K, which is often used instead of the Celtic C, there being no K in the Irish alphabet. The Irish form of the word is com or coam. All right, and so which was established, and this Ireland was established there, whose ruler was at the head of all organized religion and the leader of all who worship the supreme deity. The deception practice has been successful for a long time, but it could not last forever. The connection of the priest and myth at last became apparent, and the solution of the riddle of history was found, and the fiction is exposed. The people of this island discovered the mariner's compass and had it in use from remote ages. The story that the compass came from China or that the Portuguese obtained it from the Mohammedan sailors on the coast of Africa is fictitious and is similar to other fictions which have been put into circulation by either credulous, or very designing persons. Their voyages to Iceland alone is presumptive evidence sufficient to establish that fact. For in later times, when the first Northmen visited that distant island, they found evidence that Irish monks had been there long before. Their long voyages across the Atlantic Ocean to both North and South America is further presumptive evidence to confirm our belief in this fact. The voyages of those Phoenicians were not haphazard or dependent on a guess. The communication between Iceland and both Americas, North and South, was constant and sustained. Let's reread that. The communication between Ireland and both Americas, North and South, was constant and sustained. The extensive and, for that time, highly advanced civilization which they established on both those continents amply warrants this belief. The remains of their works are in our own country. The remains of their works are in our own country, but much more so in Mexico, Yucatan, and South America. Investigation and research will prove the truth of these statements. The monuments still remaining in those countries are unmistakable proofs as to who their authors were. The existence of both Sphinx and pyramidal remains in Yucatan is not due to mere coincidence or chance. The art of music was developed by them and cultivated to a greater extent than any other country. It was truly the homeland of music. The proof of this fact remains yet in evidence after centuries of more or less neglect, in the fact that of the 34,000 tunes known in European music, a little more than 17,000 are of Irish origin. Wow. This fact of itself affords a most wonderful testimony for their psychologist and the thinker of the past accomplishments of this people in the art of music. It is the same with a race as it is with an individual. It requires time to develop any gift or art. And the fact that they still possess it to such a degree after such a long period of national decadence and neglect proves by its being there in such wonderful measure that it is the result of generations of past culture. Thank you, Brother James Spalding. I really appreciate you. Oh, I definitely plan on it. I definitely plan on coming to visit Ireland. It's the motherland. I'm coming home. And here we are to chapter 4. And we're not going to read chapter 4, but I'm sure it's going to be good based off the title, The Compact of Rome and England for the Conquest of Ireland. And once again, we already read that English is pretty much, have their hands tied behind their back. They're being used as pawns by the Roman yoke. And it's just for them to pretty much invade into Ireland. But we're not going to go into, like I said, chapter 4 right now. So we're just going to leave off right there. And pretty much just kind of sum up what we just read. So we just read once again that what was taking place in Ireland, known as ancient Erie or Erie, Hibernia, was not by mere coincidence. This was, cannot explain it. This was a all right out siege, pretty much to destroy all that the ancients who were known as the wise ones, the wisdom keepers, the keepers of the secrets of heaven and earth, the intellectual ones, the good ones. Many different terms we were known as the hygienic ones, those who were known to bring the world to a civilized state. Unfortunately, because of the ignorance that was passed through the age of conquest, many of us had no idea that the honor and the reverence that we should be given the Irish, also known as the ancient Aryans, or I like to say the ancient Orions, because we are in a position now that we must utilize the knowledge that they possessed. We must look for it, and we must allow it to see the light of day once again as us being the descendants of the light bearers, or of us being the descendants of light. And us, or now if we are known as descendants of light, that make us what? The children of light, the children of the sun, the children of Baal. All right. And for many folks don't know, as we can see with my name, Belmont, it clearly ties us back to the sun god. So our predecessors knew what they were doing when they were naming us or giving us these given names and surnames, which known as our free names, our higher names. And even though it may have been known that it come from the Normans, but a lot of us had surnames prior before the so-called Norman conquest. So the Normans just pretty much made it a normal thing. They normalized it. All right. But from what we, once again, we see that the English and the Irish are family. We're one and the same. Our blood, like they say, goes back to the ancient Celtic stock, which were known as who? The Gaels, or the Angles, the angels. So why I always constantly keep referring you brothers to the fallen angels is because we fell in conscious, we fell in understanding in who we are, and we fell into what they call chaos and darkness. And darkness is equivalent to ignorance. And we must, like I said, we must repent and bring ourselves back to the proper understanding regarding who we are. And only way for you to be able to do so, you have to be still. You have to purify yourself. You have to purify your heart, and you have to purify your mind, which they say or call a baptism. So you must have to start over from scratch in your teaching and understanding, and have an open heart and open mind regarding the information you start reading, especially if you listen to the information that I'm reading here on my channel. That should hopefully give you enough comfortability in regards to going down that corridor of truth, where your heart knows that the information in there, if it's true or not. Once you start seeing that our reality, there's multiple worlds or multiple dimensions existing right now simultaneously within this space. Many of those dimensions are predicated off of this information you should know in regards to the Irish as being preserved not only in the Bible but also in the pyramids, and then be able to see that being part of our everyday life that us as English people are living today and putting out there to the forefront. But we have to now start doing it with clarity and understanding regarding who we are from the stock, as well to the point that we can explain it from those of us who never knew this information before. So once again, brothers and sisters, it is a beautiful time to be alive. Today is Friday, which is Venus Day, which is the day of love, and I love you. And those who taught love was known as the ancient Irish. Those who bought the poetry was known as the ancient Irish or the Aryans. Those who were teaching us empathy, compassion, and all of the principles that we have learned within our various schools of thought in regards to spirituality, we have to give the honor back to those who go back to the ancient Aryans, those who were known as the keepers, those who were known as the wise ones. And we, once again, are the descendants of those who are known, once again, as the children of the sun. So with that being said, I love you, brothers and sisters. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. If you want to help support the channel, you can help support for me to be able to do this consistently. I need help. And one part of the helping is you can hit me at the Cash App, $Dion Belmont. That does not only help this channel, but that also helped me to help the original indigenous British church, the British Isles Church Indigenous Church, was now known as the Third Temple English Church of England. And remember, that is still tied to the original Irish church, going back to the original monasteries that was created way before so-called Rome came into a picture, going all the way back to the temples of Esau or Isis, or however you want to be able to explain it or speak the name. It all goes back to the temple of the sun. So with that being said, I love you. Peace. See you on the flip side.